Okay,
right.
John, take it away.
So thanks, Ned, for providing this space for this to happen and the encouragement and all that. And I really encourage people to get involved. If you have something you want to talk about or something you want to hear people talk about, talk to Ned. That's what this is all about. Um, and you can get as involved as you want. So tonight we're going to be talking about the new engineer, how you become the new engineer, uh, and what happens afterwards, how you hire the new engineer, and what you should do afterwards. We have a panel, which I'm grateful to these three folks for stepping up to help out. Without them, this wouldn't be much of an event. So what we're going to be talking about mostly is questions that some of which came out of my head and Nadia's head as we talked about this, but a lot of them are coming from questions that folks submitted before when you signed up. You had the option to submit questions. Some of you did, and appreciate that. I want to kind of address a couple of those first. So the question was, do you have a question you'd like the panel to answer? A number of you said yes. I hope that we will hear from those people during the course of this. You can send a DM to Ned or to Nadia. They will get those to me. I may try to fold them into questions that I've already got lined up. I suspect that things will be pretty thematic.
You can also just put them in the main chat. It doesn't have to be a private message.
Yeah. I may not see them, but Ned and Nadia will be seeing that. So we had another question, which a couple of you asked, which was, how can I get a software engineering job? I hope that this will answer that question for you. And I'm going to come back and ask you that at the end of this and ask you to communicate on this. So I hope that you who asked that question are here and will be ready to talk about that. A couple of questions that were about Python generally, about using NoSQL, frameworks for finance solutions, becoming proficient in Linux to land a DevOps engineer position. Those felt a bit more specialized than I wanted to cover here. The breakout rooms would be a great place to talk about those. If you want to do that, find somebody in the breakout rooms to chat about them, or maybe ask for a talk on that. So that's maybe not on the DevOps one. I'm not sure if that's our area, but as we will. So the way we're going to do this is I'm kind of breaking this into three nominal chapters. We're thinking about how you become an engineer, how you get to be hireable. And then we're going to kind of shift into what is the interview process like. And then we're going to kind of wrap up with, once you've got the job, what happens then? So if you're waiting for your question, it's probably going to come in one of those blocks. It should be obvious where that should fall. But first, before we dive into that, I'd like to have the panel introduce themselves briefly, who you are, where you're from, and or just something about yourselves, how you got to be sitting where you are talking about this. Maybe we start with Stephen.
Sure. Thanks, John. Thank you, Ned, and appreciate you all inviting me here. So I work alongside Ned over at edX. So I don't know if you all are familiar, but I'm happy to go into detail. Probably not in this session, but always happy to talk about edX as an organization. Shameless plug, sorry. But I've been recruiting overall for 7 years in the technology space, 2 years over at edX, predominantly software and technical professionals, but have been doing so across the Boston and New York City market. So happy to talk on behalf of the interviewing, the HR side of things, the dark art of what is talent acquisition, and to kind of debunk some of the fact that it isn't a dark art, and to kind of break down how you can be successful. But thank you for inviting me, and thanks, John, for moderating.
Thank you. And Jackson?
Yeah, hey folks, I'm Jackson Wilkinson. I most recently in the before times or whatever we call it was SVP of Product Design and Engineering at Path AI. when COVID hit, I sort of dedicated 2020 to working on COVID related issues. So I spent 4 months with the US Digital Response Team working on like NYC's PPE crisis and homeless encampment outbreaks in Berkeley and Oakland, California, and hospital capacity in Pennsylvania. But for the last 3 months, I've been CTO of an organization, a not-for-profit called Project Beacon, which is funded by Google Ventures and Fidelity's venture arm F Prime, and a partner of the Broad Institute, to rapidly expand access to COVID testing here in Massachusetts. And so for the last 10 weeks, we've been kind of trying to build a decent booking, scheduling, resulting platform that people won't hate to use. And we will launch our first site, our first large scale test site with Massachusetts next week in Revere at Suffolk Downs. So as of next week, if you need a test, it's free. You can go to Suffolk Downs and you can book your appointment on beacontesting.com. So we're not hiring anybody, so no shameless plugs other than, get tested if you need it, and here's a free way to do it. So yeah, thanks for having me, and looking forward to a good conversation.
So, and sorry, I'm having trouble with my muting.
Hi, folks. Kaniah here. I am an engineer currently at Wayfair, working on one of their supplier integration teams. Before this, I graduated from a coding bootcamp called Resilient Coders, specifically for people of color coming from predominantly low-income backgrounds, trying to get underrepresented people into tech and into high-growth software engineering jobs. Before that, I came from nonprofit space, working in education. I'm a mom of one 3-year-old who gives me so much life outside of work and during work now that we are working from home. So that's me. Thanks again for having me, and to John for inviting me to speak on this panel. Super excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you. Thank you all for being here. We'll dive into the, I think one of the first questions that sort of frames a lot of this is, what are we looking for anyway? And that's, I've been trying to write these questions fairly generally. So, so what are we looking for when we're hiring? What are we looking for when we're coming into the space? What are we after here? What do we, how does this make us happier? And I'm kind of go around the same circle, if you hear your thoughts. So again, Stephen?
Yeah, and can you clarify who the we is in this situation?
Well, in your case, when you're so when you're looking for candidates, what are you looking for?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it all starts with, the conversation with my hiring manager and partnering with the team. And I think one of the things we really try to define when we're opening any role is, what is the desired impact in the organization? What can we do to create a balanced team? What are the desired outcomes? And even before the candidate, comes into the picture, we ideally have the desired outcomes over the course of the first 30, 90 days. So one of the things that we go into is really break down the assessment criteria for how do we determine if somebody's a good fit for what we've designed, what we have as a need in the organization. And I think, just knowing that, taking yourself out of it, really kind of puts you into the position of, what is the organization looking for? What is the need in the company? And what is the need on this team? And I think it can vary, right? And it depends on what you're doing with Python, the area of focus and technology. But, I think as far as some of the earlier career positions we have, it varies based on the need of the team. But I think generally we're looking for somebody who can learn and be dynamic. I think as an employer, first and foremost, we're not looking for everyone who can, do the job day one. We may, if that's the goal, but I think you'll learn in talking to the recruiter and in talking to the team, that may not always be the case. We're not expecting someone to have all the answers. We're expecting someone to grow. So I think, when you go back to that initial question, what are we looking for? We want to see how you've grown in the past. Tell me about a time where you've had to come into an organization where there was a need. You've had to learn something you didn't know before. And maybe you've had to work with a team that's either established, it's a new team, and where have you done that? So I think outside of the context of whatever the specific scenario this team is going through, whatever problem they're looking to solve, you may have not done it, but we're looking for somebody who can adapt, kind of at the bare bones of that.
Jen, you want us to just keep going in order? Perfect.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Cool. So I think Stephen's answer was really directionally in the right line there. But I think that the reason why this is such an important question is because it can be so opaque, and everybody takes their job search very personally, and there are a lot of reasons for feeling that way, but there's no way to actually know. I'm usually on the hiring manager side of this equation. There's no way for the candidate to know for sure what's going on in my head when a job description goes up. I may be looking for somebody who has a very particular piece of experience or capability for this particular project, or I might just be trying to build out an early team, and I want folks who are cross trainers and can potentially do a bunch of stuff. And that makes it really, really hard for applicants and candidates, especially when they might have a really strong background, a really compelling resume, a great story, a good portfolio, but it might just not be in line. And that's not a candidate's fault. That's more my fault. That's more Stephen's fault than anything else. But we're not always very good at communicating those types of things, and that's unfortunate. There are a few in my mind, non-negotiables, regardless of the role, though, and those are the things that you can really pay attention to. And the first one is aptitude for learning, which is Stephen already spoke to quite effectively. The second is communication. In any role, in any team that I'm going to be a part of, I want to surround myself with great communicators. That doesn't mean that you need to be an orator or anything like that. It just means you need to be able to effectively convey the ideas that you're trying to communicate. And frankly, that starts with the resume and the cover letter. A lot of folks sort of phone it in on those types of things, or think that it's a way of offering a laundry list of different pieces of experience. But I'm looking at a resume to tell me what you think is most important about you in a digestible way. And if I have to sift through 8 pages of that, then I'm going to question your ability to effectively communicate those types of issues. And cover letter is sort of similar there. But then, it goes throughout the entire process, where I'm in an interview, I'm looking to get a sense of the things that you've picked up on the job, exactly the way Stephen was describing. I'm looking to get a sense of how you've communicated with your coworkers or your colleagues in a group project in college. It sort of doesn't matter what the level is. But if you come across as somebody who is likely to be able to learn the skills, and you're going to be able to be a good, positive colleague and easy to communicate with, then that probably puts you into that 80th percentile, sort of no matter what. And everything else here is just sort of the challenge of the fit of that particular role.
I think for me, this is such an interesting question, because I'm new to the industry, and I'm coming in as someone who comes from a very non-traditional technical background. And I think for me, what we're looking for, when I'm looking at companies, I'm looking for a company that is going to be inclusive and welcoming, and thinking about holistically as an organization, how are they going to support me? Because I think that the hiring process is a two-way street, right? It's not just about what am I going to get from this organization, or what this organization is going to get from me, but what am I also going to get from this organization? How am I going to be able to grow? How am I going to be able to learn? So I think those are some of the things that I look for when I'm becoming hireable, right? Like, I think about what am I looking for in this organization? What am I going to be able to say in like 3 years? I feel happy about having been able to work at this organization. I think those are some of the things that I think about. But I also think about what Jackson is talking about, some of those transferable skills when I am coming from a very non-traditional technical background. What are some of the things that I can highlight as an employee, as someone who is an applicant looking to get into the tech space, as what are some of the things that I've done in the past that maybe are not technical, but can show that I'm someone who is someone who will be a good fit on your team, right? I have some good communication skills. I have ability to work through interpersonal relationships and things like that. So I think it's important when you're like someone who is coming from a non-technical background to think about what have you done in the past that relates to what you're applying to do, and trying to, I guess, transfer those skills into your resume to make you a little bit more hireable, a little bit more desirable as you are applying to different organizations and different companies.
And I want to just underline a little bit of something Kaniah said earlier about the ability for the organization to support a candidate. And, that's something that's going on in a good hiring manager's head the whole time too. And can be another one of those things that's fairly opaque when you see a job description for, software engineer. You don't know exactly what level that is, but when candidates come in, they might look really compelling. But then my next thought is, if they have a limited amount of experience, it's, are we organizationally able to support this candidate at this stage of their career? And I really hope that the answer is yes, but it's not always true. We certainly, if we, have just a few senior engineers and we have a decent number of more junior to mid folks, then that mentorship sort of pipeline might be relatively fraught at that point. We don't want to exacerbate that issue. So again, it's a tough thing to know as a candidate from the outside looking in what the dynamics around that are. But hopefully, to Kaniah's point, that's a two-way street where the company is thinking, are we able to really effectively support this candidate, and you as a candidate should be thinking and asking the questions about whether the company can really support you as well.
Thank you. So I have a couple of things that we could go. So Kaniah, I want to thank you for bringing up the question of diversity. A lot of the things you brought up are really important here, and I want to drill into that a bit. When you were searching, I know that you landed at Wayfair, but I think you probably talked to a few companies, and I know that you know a lot of folks from your experience at Brazilian, and you talked to other people about their job search experience. Do you feel that in general, the things that you talked about are things that companies are valuing now, that there is support for both the support for a desire to bring in diversity and to really actively pursue that, and not just kind of like hope that we get diverse somehow magically, but also everything that every candidate wants, treating the hiring process as that two-way street that you talked about, that we're not just in a exchange of time for money relationship, but we're in a long-term relationship that actually develops a person moving forward. Do you feel like that's valued? Those things are valued in?
I think so. I think when it comes to like organizations and like, I feel some organizations tend to feel like there is a pipeline problem when it comes to being able to find diverse candidates. But I think the problem is that there is a time limit on how much they can search for a specific candidate. And this may be a different discussion for a different day. We could talk about diversity all day long. But I think that it's like being able to look outside of the specific bounds of where they're searching for their candidates, right? Because if you're thinking about diversity in tech, the majority of folks are probably not coming from the very traditional backgrounds. And so you have to be able to kind of expand where you're looking and spend some time finding the candidates that you're looking for in terms of diversity. But I think in terms of what specifically speaking to Wayfair, it's a conversation that we have all the time around diversity, equity, and especially inclusion, and thinking about the folks that we have on our teams and how we can create spaces that are welcoming to folks. For me, I feel as though my voice is heard at Wayfair. I feel as though I'm included in conversations. And I feel that like, if I feel something is not going particularly justly on my team or in interactions that I've had on other teams. I think there are fields of communication that are in place to be able to navigate those particularly tough conversations, which I think that's like intentionally done here at Wayfair. And I think is something that can be implemented in other spaces, in other organizations as well. And thinking about like when tough conversations are going to arise, how are we going to be able to navigate these conversations with folks? Because I think when you get a group of people who come from different backgrounds, it's just the nature of things that's going to happen. And so how are we going to be able to have these tough conversations, but make it a space that's welcoming for all to be able to let their voice be heard?
Thank you. So I'm glad to hear that the experience is going well there. That is, because I know that I've heard from a lot of people that isn't always the case. So it sounds like things are changing in this world, and that's good. There's a question from the floor about asking about support, the kind of support that Jackson, you brought up, and what are the ways, when somebody is entering the interview process, how can somebody bring that up and ask about that and find out whether they're likely to get that kind of support before they even continue with the interview? Stephen, can we do that to you?
Yeah, and you're talking in particular, having like a mentor type of structure and ensuring that you are feeling supported when you get to the organization. Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things I can say, and you may hear this echoed throughout everything I say, is ask questions. Ask questions before, you go on the interview. Ask questions if you didn't get the job. Ask questions if you got the job and you're not certain if this is the organization for you. And I think there's a level of preparedness that doesn't solely fall on the candidate, but I think going into a job search, you have this awareness of the type of organization you want to work in, the impact that you want to have. But one of the things is, what type of organization do I want to be part of? The size matters, the structure matters. And I think one of the things you can ask is, if I come to the organization, I want to be successful in my role, what support structures do exist? And feel comfortable in saying that, because there may be buddy programs, there may be a mentorship capacity or a structure in place. And I think it's important, as because we think about kind of the divide. In a small organization, you may have more impact, but you may not have that structure. So you have to think about going into your job search, what do you need? What are the things that you're hoping for in this role, and making sure that you're getting that. Jackson touched on something, and Kaniah too. I always call it the career transaction, and transaction is such an ugly word, but it's okay to be selfish. What do you get if you're going to take this role? And I say this to early career engineers. I say this to senior principal manager, of engineering. Why does this make sense for you? Why is this a good fit? Because to everyone's point on the panel, I want to make sure I can support you. So it is much on the candidate's responsibility to ensure that that's there, as it is me as the hiring manager or recruiter in this case.
Cool. Either of you, Jackson or Kaniah, want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, it's totally true. Candidates usually, there's an established power dynamic in hiring processes where the company and the hiring manager is usually like 90% of the time projecting that they are giving you this wonderful opportunity to bequeath you with a role that is going to be wonderful. And most candidates sort of play into that power dynamic, and it gives the company and the hiring manager sort of a great advantage there. And candidates are worried that they'll seem like trouble if they ask too many questions or something like that. If you find yourself in a situation where if you don't feel comfortable asking the questions that are important to you about a role, that might be a sign that maybe this isn't the right organization for you. And that's okay. I think we're in a big field. The skills that we're talking about here tonight are relatively in demand. And yes, everybody takes this seriously and personally, and everybody wants offers from everybody that they talk to, but don't waste your own time barking up trees for organizations that aren't going to support you the right. Now, the big asterisk on this, and Stephen earmuffs on this, is that the dynamics that a recruiter has with respect to the questions that you have may be different from the team that you end up on. And so, it's important to realize that if you're in an initial phone screen and you're talking to a recruiter and you're asking questions about mentorship opportunities and those types of things, you may get answers that are broadly true for the organization. And then when you talk to the team that you're actually interviewing for, it may not be the case, and vice versa. There may not be great opportunities company-wide, and there may not be a huge infrastructure for training or supporting junior candidates, but you may actually be interviewing for a team where the manager is excellent and is really able to support you in those sorts of ways. So it's easy to sort of prejudge in either direction and misjudge in either direction early on in those conversations. So if you think that there's a chance that this is a company that you would really like to work with, then don't necessarily write it off after that first conversation. Try to have the opportunity to talk to a couple folks about it, and you might find that there are different perspectives.
So I want to shift a little bit. We talked a little bit about kind of how to approach this. I will get a little bit nuts and bolts about the question. I asked, what are we looking for? A lot of people have concerns about what technical level should they be at? What should I be able to build my own website? Should I be able to show you a website that I built? Do I need to know computer science? Do I have to have read The Art of Computer Programming and understood it? Trick question. No, you don't. Do I need to know how many piano tuners there are in the city of Chicago? Apparently that's very important. So I think everybody coming into engineering has these questions. So for Stephen and Jackson, what nuts and bolts? Can you give us some thresholds? Are there thresholds? And then we'll come to Kaniah with a slight variation of the question.
Jackson, you want to take this first?
Yeah. So
swap the order.
I'll kick it off. The answers to those questions totally vary. They vary dramatically by organization, by team. There are some companies that are going to be absolutely great at taking people who have a basic understanding of a language and training them into a very effective junior role. I would say that the odds, as a general rule of thumb, and oversimplifying, the larger the company, the more likely they are to have programs and supports for very entry-level roles and applicants. If you're looking at like a 5-person startup, on one hand, startups are like desperate to hire somebody, but they also need every single person to carry their own weight at all times. And so typically, if you're like a single-digit size company, you want everybody to be sort of mid-career or thereabouts, or more senior than that. And again, those are overgeneralizations. There are exceptions to all these things, but if you are, it is never a bad thing to have more experience. So the more experience you're giving yourself, whether that's through formal education or like school or boot camps, or it's just projects that you've taken on and executed yourself, those always give you more to work with and an advantage. And they're always attractive to folks who are hiring no matter what. So it's never a waste of time to do those types of things. And, I have my degree is in music and philosophy. I don't have a computer science degree. So, I'm sort of speaking from experience there. I've literally never taken a class on anything related to this stuff. So it's definitely, possible to find yourself in a great role where you can sort of expand and grow from from being pretty naive to at least all the professional dynamics of this scene. But it totally varies. There's no single answer of what you need to know for a role.
I'm going to echo a lot of what Jackson said, and I know it's frustrating to say it varies, but someone told me something early on in my career that seemed perplexing at the time, but over time it becomes less Yoda oriented and makes more sense. You know when you're ready when you get the job. And I think there's something perplexing in that, but because it varies so much, you don't know the underlying story of if they're truly looking for a junior level software engineer, if the organization's even prepared to be able to assess someone at your level, because it may not be on you. So one of the things I would say is understanding the responsibilities of the role, looking at that job description. If you've got an interview and you've spoken to the recruiter, kind of breaking that down a little bit more and focusing more on the responsibilities. Can I do this job? And less on the requirements. Do I have everything to do this job? And there may be opportunities where you do need the skills to do the job. If it's something that's heavily programming in a particular language, then you may need those skills to do the job, especially if the company has goals with the timeline, things like that. But I would say it does vary. And I think being able to speak to your background and what you've done and how it aligns to the responsibilities, even if it's not picture perfect, even if you haven't done the exact things. And the other thing I would say is, even if you don't have all the, to Jackson's point, having the CS background to be able to speak to algorithms to the T. I think like ONO notation, if you can't speak to that, but you know the concepts, you know the way it works. Someone once told me, your technical interview is often a behavioral interview. They want to know that you know the concepts, the ability to do things, to come to a solution. And if you can't come to a solution, they may be okay with that because they're not expecting you to. So you never know what their assessment criteria is going into the interview. Therefore, do what you can, talk through your past experiences, because it may be enough. But to Jackson's point, it does vary. It does vary.
So I want to twist the question a little bit for you, Kaniah, because obviously you're not in a hiring role, but you have recently been on the other side of that desk. So I want to let you speak in both directions here, because I think you probably have something to say. So as somebody who's recently been hired, how does that work for you? Is there anything that you would like to see changed about those answers to make life easier for people who are coming in, and for the people who are coming into this and following in your footsteps here, interviewing next week, or starting to put out the resumes next week? What can you tell them about this? Because I imagine this is a little bit frustrating to not know. Is there any guidance that you can give folks? That's two questions for you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think the thing with looking for a job and applying to different positions, knowing if you're ready, I don't think there's ever a point where you feel 100% confident. But I think if you are someone who has found your way in being able to problem solve, and being able to work through problems that are going to come up, I think that's one thing as a software engineer, is that the challenges of the day are going to always be a challenge of the day, whether it be some challenge that you saw 3 months ago or a new challenge that you're seeing for the first time. Are you going to be able to work through the different challenges that you see on the job? I think whether you come from a traditional background of getting a CS degree, or from non-traditional background of going to a boot camp or self-taught, being able to work through having the foundations of learning how to build applications and building your first CRUD app. Those are some of the fundamentals that you can work through and know that you can build these specific projects to kind of showcase that you have these fundamental things to apply to a job. But being able to work through the problems that you are seeing as you're building these applications are kind of the highlight for me to showcase to an employer. I don't know if that answers your question, and you can reframe them and ask me again.
I think that I guess the other side of that, is there anything that you would like to see more concretely? Like, are these answers like it varies? Jackson and Stephen might not be in a great position to change those answers, but how do those answers sound to you as somebody who's recently in this chair?
I think those are valid answers. I think it does vary depending on the organization that you're applying to. I think one thing that we see, and I can call out in terms of the interview process, is just like the typical whiteboarding process, and being able to work through specific algorithms or typical interview questions. I don't see like very often that we are like working through those problems on a day-to-day basis. So how is that like a way to show that have aptitude to be able to work at this job? I think about like the maybe take home projects that someone can work through, or being able to spend a little bit more time in an interview, like coding challenge, pair programming. I think those are some of the ways to kind of show aptitude, and being able to work through like more day-to-day problems that someone would see on the job rather than the typical whiteboarding challenge. But I think it does vary in terms of like foundational knowledge and what an organization is looking for. But I think you can get that at being self-taught. I think you can get that going to a boot camp. I think you can get that from a CS degree. I think, yeah.
One thing that Kaniah reminded me of is that's part of this disconnect between candidates and companies, for an alliterative version there, is I think candidates, especially early in their careers or when entering a new industry, think that the process on the company side is very well developed and has extensive rubrics and detailed criteria that represent like what is good and what is bad in a candidate. And there may be places where that's true. I've frankly never been to one that is super well developed in that way. Most of the time, somebody says, I need help at a company, and somebody else says, okay, well, we should hire someone. And then the first person says, well, how do we do that? And they sit down for 2 hours or 3 hours or even less and write up a job description that gets posted somewhere, and resumes start coming in. And then they say, all right, who do we want to talk to? And there's a 15-minute conversation about that. And some people come in and a discussion is had, and then a hiring offer is made, but it's really squishy. And even at mid-developed company, that's like a super ill-developed process. But even once you've gotten a couple of notches beyond that, a lot of that squishiness is still true. And it's a bad thing in a lot of ways, because it's tough to know how to measure yourself, and it's tough to get feedback. You as a hiring manager can't go back and say, well, we were looking for you to score a 6.5 on this, and you scored a 6 because you left out a semicolon or something like that. It'd be great in a lot of senses if it was super objective like that. But at the same time, people come from all different sorts of backgrounds and have all different sorts of skill sets, and their abilities in one area may make up for deficiencies in other areas. And in my experience, the lack of structure that exists in the vast majority of hiring processes, it cuts both ways. And some candidates it is a negative, and in other candidates it's a total positive. So but it's completely amorphous and can be really frustrating for lots of folks. So it's important to keep that squishiness in mind.
Cool.
Absolutely. And if I may, kind of just speaking on behalf of an organization who's building more structure and less squishiness in rubrics and assessment criteria, I think one of the important things is to come in with really that understanding of what you're looking for in the hire without, bringing in, people. I think like having a clear understanding of, I need someone to fill this role on my team. I need somebody to help us get to this goal. Being able to outline that and then create assessment criteria, and maybe there are rubrics, there generally should be, hopefully, to create a more objective process. And I hear what you're saying, Jackson. Sometimes that's not always the case, but everyone has areas of improvement. Not to say anything bad about organizations like that, because maybe they don't have anyone, telling them they do rubrics. But I think going in with the mindset of talking to the hiring manager, who are you willing to accept into this role? Because yeah, they may be able to do that role, but they may not be able to do it tomorrow, right? So after you've met this person, where are their gaps? And that's what you're building into that person's ramp up plan. And I think it's important to understand that, when you're going into an interview, there may be rubrics, but if you don't have the solution, if you haven't nailed the problem, if you're looking at a scenario or a whiteboard where you're saying, I've never dealt with this before, you didn't fail the interview. It's not over. Because they may not be looking for that. To go back to that existing point, they may be looking for the fact that you can, ideate on these solutions, that you can come together, that you can problem solve, like Kaniah said, and that might be enough. So, the rubric has a level of flexibility. It goes back to it varies. You're never going to know that until you kind of remain resilient. Because if the phone interview isn't going well, if the video interview isn't going well from your perspective, it may be going okay for the other person. So that's the only additive I have.
Cool. And that's a good spot to transition a bit later than I expected. So this is a great discussion, and we are moving further, moving into the interview phase. So we may not get to everything that I had in mind to cover tonight, but that's fine. We can do more of this kind of thing. But I do want to talk a little bit about the interview process. So basically, from each of your perspective, as somebody who has been involved in the interview process, what does the entry-level engineer need to know about interviews? And I'm speaking fairly generally about both behavioral and technical. When you go into interviews, as a person who has not interviewed in this kind of role before, what should you know going in? And maybe do we want to reverse the order this time and start with you, Kaniah, and go through the...
Sure. I think I kind of touched on it before, but I think being able to understand, there's usually a behavioral portion before where you can get an understanding of what the technical interview is going to look like. And then being able to either perform at like a whiteboarding challenge or being able to get enough information for your technical interview or for your technical take home to be able to complete it then. But I think that having a foundation of building CRUD apps and then having a foundation of, the specific coding challenges and algorithms that we see in like a technical whiteboarding challenge will kind of fare well for you and be able to set you up for success, whether that be like doing something like leak codes all the time, or doing HackerRank, or I can't remember the other one, but there's a few different coding challenge and sites that you can work through to be able to get yourself kind of ramped up for a technical challenge after feeling comfortable enough in the foundation that you have. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Stephen?
Yeah, all great points. What else to add? I would say that the coding portion or technical portion will probably vary based on the organization and the job that you're applying for. You can expect probably a combination of both technical interviews as well as behavioral, to Kaniah's point. And one of the things that I think I saw an earlier question in the chat, what can I do to prepare for either the technical or behavioral portions of these interviews? I'd say, coming in and being able to tell your story. I always look for when I talk to anyone really who's looking for a job, I want to know their story. So I'd say the biggest thing is craft your story. Why you, why now? And I think being able to speak to your past experiences, even if you don't have professional experience, the things that you've done, whether it be a boot camp, your CS program, wherever you've learned, and work professionally or non-professionally in a technical arena, be able to speak to that and come with specific examples For those of you who aren't familiar with behavioral style interviewing, it's really trying to get a feel for what you've done in the past, and how that past experience and behavior will dictate what you'll do in that organization. And they really want to hear about scenarios you've been through. So I'd say come with examples, come with times that you've worked with others. If you're applying for a job where you'll be working on a team, if you're going to be collaborating with others, right? Talk about that group project, talk about the time and specifically what you did in that project. And then your ability, what others said, where have you learned new things? Whether you're a junior engineer or a senior engineer, you're going to have to, when you're joining a new organization, and if they have a tech stack that's different than yours, you're going to have to learn. So you've probably already done that, right? So being able to take those examples, that aptitude, that growth mindset, and be able to take it into this job interview. And there would be a number of assessment criteria that they have on their end. But I think if you do those things and you be able to speak to your background, speak to your past experiences, and speak to what they're looking for in the job. And then if you got it, the job, great. If you didn't, ask why, right? Because I think the tools that you can bring into an interview are the experiences that you have from your past interview, right? You might go for one, and that's fantastic that you landed your maybe dream job, but is that the right opportunity for you? So take those experiences that you learned in prior interviews and figure out, what do I need to do differently? And it's okay if the interview didn't go well. It's not a failure. Be able to take that experience and move on.
You only need to get one job. Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, I think the advice so far has been really solid and useful, and there's not a ton more to add. It just, do your best to play to your strengths, and remember that most of a job, even a technical job, is most of the time is not about the technical skills and the code that you're writing. It's about the people that you're working with. And if somebody, if you have a good conversation with somebody that you're interviewing with, even during a very sort of hard technical interview, if it's a good open conversation and you're generating a good rapport, then small errors that you make are not nearly as important as they might be otherwise. So it's partially the company's responsibility to make you comfortable in this environment. And usually I try to take it upon myself to break the ice as much as possible, and joke with candidates and try to get them really comfortable so that they do their best. But a lot of companies don't do that, and that again sort of puts the candidate at a disadvantage. But do your best to get yourself comfortable, and that's going to be that's going to put you in the best possible situation to be successful in the interview.
Cool. So we're moving into, I think, probably the edge of everybody's screen time. I have one or two more questions, and then we'll probably break out to those who want to stick around and talk a bit more in depth and stick around. But I wanted to get a little bit into the what now. Okay, so you've had the interview, and it went well. You got the offer. You took the offer. You're employed, and yeah, hooray! Congratulations. It does happen. Everybody who's here thinking oh, no, actually you do. I've 6 or 7 years ago, I was a technical writer, and then it passed an interview, and then I was a programmer. It just happens that way. So I won't tell you about the ones that I failed. So once you get into the job, I guess I'm imagining that a lot of people are asking the question that was asked by one attendee, which is, what's the day like in the office? I mean, what's it like to work as an engineer? And that is probably a useful thing to know as you're thinking about this. Does anybody want to say a few words about daily life as an engineer?
Yeah, I mean, guess what? It depends. In all these cases, this is that's why this is such a great industry. You can be a software engineer that's working at a company that does absolutely nothing to do with software. You could work at a software company. You could be an engineer at a company that only does software and thinks about it as its core competency. And some of those fits are going to be right for some people, and some of them are going to be right for other people. But it's, you know, it's important to ask these questions. What's it like at this company? Some companies are going to be very meeting oriented, and you're going to be coding for, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 hours a day, and you're going to spend the rest of your time in meetings. Others are going to be like, we just have stuff to get done, so we have a 15-minute stand up in the morning, and then people work until midnight or something like that. And it's you know, totally the opposite. And you may be totally down with meetings, or you may absolutely loathe meetings. So again, to Steve's initial thing, ask the questions, find out. And you actually, frankly, you may not know what you want if you're early in your career. Certainly when I was early in my career, you know, being invited into a meeting, I was like, all right, this is my jam. This is my shot. You know, I'm like going to a meeting with a client. This is big time. And, you know, now I'm like, oh, good. I only have 5 hours of meetings today. This is, you know, like a bonus. So these things totally vary from company to company. And it's probably among the most important questions you should be asking. How am I going to get supported in my role to help fill my goals? They're obviously finding out if you're qualified to do the job or be close to it. And then what's the day-to-day going to be like? And then, you know, finally, am I working on something that is important and valuable to me? Because otherwise you'll, you know, burn yourself out after 6 months or 12 months or 2 years or something like that, and have to find something else. So super important question, but no single answer.
Maybe I could ask, so I know, Kaniah, you are actually, you know, you know, asset chair engineer, and you have a day-to-day. Do you want to maybe walk us through like what you do from, you know, the morning? Like, what does your day look like usually?
Sure. Well, COVID definitely changed what my day kind of looks like, for sure. Before COVID, I would get into the office, do stand up early in the morning, and kind of work through whatever ticket I was working on for the day. We would have like whatever meetings we needed for our sprint updates or sprint planning meetings. But that kind of changed. Now I get up for the day, make my kid breakfast, and then like chill out for the morning usually. And I still have my morning stand-ups around 10:15, and then kind of work through whatever ticket I'm working on for the day. But my team is also incorporated, because of COVID, we've incorporated team time, which is coffee chats or like team working sessions in the afternoon, which has been really, really nice. And then I usually end for the day around like 4-ish. And if there's extra work that I need to like finish up in the evening after my son has gone to bed, I do that. But I don't work a very long day because of being home with my son. It was something I was going to say that I was super excited about. And that is, once you get onto your team, once you get into an organization, the thing that like the what now that I found to be really important is being able to find your tribe at your organization, or finding your tribe from your boot camp, or finding your tribe from people who you've studied with at school, and understanding like who are the people that without a doubt I know I can go to with questions without judgment. And those, I think that's one of the most important things that has like really helped me in my organization and in my job, is finding the people that have my back and who I can lean on, whether it be technically or just like thinking about interpersonal questions that I have that I'm like going through at work, being able to have someone to lean on, or have a couple people to lean on who are not directly on my team, to kind of help me work through some of the like technical challenges that I'm having or otherwise. I think that's one of the most important things I can say, is being able to make sure that you find your tribe of people who can support you once you get onto your team, because the learning doesn't stop, the challenges don't stop. And I feel like I've said that before, but yeah,
Worth saying again. It's very
Yes.
true. So I want to kind of end on the question of where we go, and that is the question of career development. We don't stay as junior. Nobody wants to hire somebody who's going to be a junior engineer for very long, right? Our hope is that and nobody wants to be a junior engineer for very long. We want to be adding more. So the question is, what can companies do? What should companies do? And what are companies doing to help develop folks, to help people reach beyond where they are, become mid-level, become senior engineers? So I guess what should we be promising, and are we meeting those promises? And I'll start with you, Stephen, this time.
Sure. Yeah. And it's a number of things. And yeah, I love the find your tribe. I think finding a buddy in an organization is probably, even addition, as part of this question is definitely something you can do. But I think as far as an organization, not on the individual level, but as an organization, you should be looking that there is a pathway, or, if there aren't baked pathways, the what's next that is already built into the organization. Ask your manager, what does success look like? Where do I go from here? Ideally, for someone in my role, what would you be looking for? Because here's what I want. And you can't remove yourself from that picture because you have goals. And I think one of the things that you can do is, ask if there's a next step, ask for pathways. But as an organization, I think there's a commitment to enabling that growth through professional development. I think there's a lot of things that organizations do well, but I think professional development is key, whether it's allocating money, time at work, whatever you can do to upskill your employees if they're asking for it, is important and necessary, to my opinion. But the other piece of that is, if you're not finding that, if you are stagnating, if you are feeling like, you're not growing, maybe that's a signal that you should look. But within your existing organization, think about professional development and ask about what is next for me and where I am today.
Thank you. Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, all that's good advice. The challenge of, especially in this field, it's less typical than in other fields to stay at a company for, a decade or something like that. And obviously that's changed, year to year and gotten less common in general, but especially in software, in part because companies are young and immature and don't always have well-developed processes, and the ones who do are often the exception rather than the rule. So, finding out those answers are really important, and finding out what could be next for you in your role, especially if that's your goal. If your goal is, I want this to get me to a senior engineer title, remember that there are lots of companies that may give you a senior engineer title and they may have done nothing for your actual professional development or skill development along the way. But if you're really interested in getting to a level where you feel like, anywhere you go, you'd be a senior engineer, then that's a worthwhile goal to talk about. But, just wondering like when you're going to get promoted or something like that may not be the best indication of whether a job is the right fit or not. It depends on what specifically your goals are. And you could, there are lots of companies that have, relatively few rungs in their ladder. They may have, just software developer as approximately their only title, where folks love working and feel challenged and have members of their tribe that they get along with well and have autonomy in their work. And so it's not a one size fits all sort of thing, but being honest with yourself about what your goals are and what you're going to be happy with is important. And if you're not going to be happy without being promoted next year or 18 months from now, then you better have that conversation during the interview process to see if that's what the path to that is, and make sure that actually does happen for other people who are coming from a similar place that you are. And if it doesn't, then you know your answer.
Yeah, I think the transparency in the interview process and understanding what kind of growth looks like at the organization. But then when you get onto the team, understanding the relationship that you have with your manager and how they can help you develop. For me, I mean, I can speak to my experience in working at Wayfair. We have very clear guidelines on what an L1 engineer competencies look like and what an L2 engineer competencies look like. And so for me, I feel like there's a clear path to what I need to do to be able to go to the next level. And so I've developed my own kind of development plan to be able to work towards that next goal. If I wanted to be promoted in the next review cycle, or if I wanted to be promoted in the next 2 review cycles. And I've developed kind of a plan for looking at the L2 competencies and what is the work that I can do now to be able to go into the next review cycle and saying that I'm ready to move to the next level. I think for me, that's one thing that I've done, and understanding, being transparent with your manager before the next review cycle comes up. Excuse my noise in the background. Being transparent with your manager and saying, here's what I'm expecting to happen within the next review cycle. Do we think this is something that we can foresee happening based on what I've done in terms of work so far? If not, what are the steps that I need to take to be able to get those things done for the next review cycle?
Kaniah, I was just assuming that those dings were actually your kids sitting there every time you made a good answer, just going ding, and that would be that would be amazing. I would totally.
It is. It's my friends very excited for the debate tonight, so excuse them.
Who is it?
You and me both. One of the things that I've found in my career, and it might be helpful to other people, is that have a conversational interview with the people that you admire their skills or how they're doing code within your company. At our company, we have something called a donut chat. And so that means that they're pairing up people that you wouldn't normally run into. You get to know a little bit about their world. They know a little bit about yours. You meet for tea. You kind of get to know each other. It's more endorsed in our company, so that means that it's easier. It would be a harder hurdle if you don't have that structure in your company. But I would just start small and kind of say, okay, I really like how this person handled this, and I'd like to know how they think about it. Maybe you can say, hey, do you have time over lunch? Or I'll treat you to tea or a beverage of your choice. Can I conversationally pick your brain? I'll leave you some bits left over. Humor for me usually helps, but it's harder because when you feel like you're supposed to be heads down and you've got your blinders on, it's harder to realize that a team is made up of people who have tools in their toolbox, and we are tools in that greater scheme of toolbox, and that not every tool is right for the right job. And so part of growing your career is figuring out your tools that you're good at, and then also trying to develop that kind of team toolbox, for a cheesy aspect of me trying to make an analogy. And that's kind of what I've found, that it's, not all your smarts, but it's also how you can show emotional intelligence and make that bridge to that other person to share your collective knowledge. And I will mute.
Why didn't I know that you were here when I was putting together this panel? Because obviously you should have been on the panel. That's a great way to end the conversation. I really appreciate what you have there. I think we have probably exhausted everybody's capacity for patiently listening to other people talk, and And I think I want to thank everybody who helped this thing happen and everybody who showed up for it. I hope everybody got much out of it, and I hope that we all are going to be better at doing what we're doing here, which is getting more people hired, working as engineers, and succeeding and thriving. So with that thought in mind, I think Ned is going to activate some breakout rooms, some of which are named topically, and maybe Ned, you can tell us how this is going to work.
Sure. So first, I'm going to end the recording just because breakout rooms can't be recorded. So if you're watching online, thanks for joining us after the event. Boston Python, I really would like to be a place for people to come and get this kind of help, get this kind of support, find your donut pals, you know, let's make things happen. So join the Slack, see us in the workspace there, and let us know how else we can help you. I'm very interested to hear from all the people who joined Boston Python specifically for this event. Did it help? Was it good? Should we do more? What else would you like to hear from for us? So thanks for coming.